YouTube. It is Friday, September 19th, and I have a trade recap to go over today. This week, so far, not the best week, only down $79 today. But this is, I'm kind of just going to disregard the charts. But I just want to go over real quickly, kind of how hard the narrative, not the narrative, but kind of finding an entry was today. And it's not really surprising because Friday, after we just pushed up all week, had FOMC. I was looking for TGIF, thank God it's Friday. Shorts to the downside. But we just weren't able to find anything except right towards the end. And then we just barely missed our take profit. And yeah. So let me just get straight into it, bro. So on the larger time frame, I marked out my 8:30 open, my 12 o'clock. And I see price pushing into this daily wick. I like how we're doing that. I like to see, some potential rejection around our 0.25 levels. I saw it here, so I knew going up we would have some sort of, confluence. We go up here, we take this high just barely, right off open. We consolidate, put in an SMT, and we break higher. There's no setup in here for me. And keep in mind my narrative. Well, my narrative was bullish first, take out the highs. My bias was bearish because I want to be taking sells down to relative equal lows, down to this ES liquidity, and thank God it's Friday. So then we would go into the 1 minute, we get our breakup structure here, we get an order block, and then ever since 10:07, I have been looking for an entry on every time frame. Right here we have a double for rally gap. This could be an entry, but then it ran. I was patient. I waited. I didn't like it because of how little we took buy side, and then we just tapped in the upper for rally gap, so it invalidated it for me. On the 15-second, there was nothing. There was just nothing anywhere really, to go off of. And then potentially, we waited, and then we got basically confirmation that we didn't want to reach up into that buy side with this SMT. So then I identified the SMT. I have my order block right here. We break structure, we retrace back into it with this up close candle that now in turn is a propulsion block for me. So then we react off this propulsion block, and now I'm expecting a double for value gap setup right here, right there. And there's also a tiny for value gap right here. So double for value gap on top of the propulsion, on top of this breaker block. We enter kind of late. I don't really remember why. We enter kind of late, and then basically, price edges our TP, which is basically that low, and then decides to run higher and then manipulate. But then, once we saw that, once we got really close to that sell side, I was like, I like how this is going. We might as well just continue because of that breaker. We're just coming back to fill it in. So then I took another sell based off a double 5 second for value gap. Broke structure, order block, propulsion, everything was perfect. It's just we wanted to really go up, and then eventually, put in relative equal highs and go down. So the market was really choppy, and my setup really doesn't, like to work in choppy conditions, but it allows me to not take trades, in specific times, or basically prevent losses. So yeah, I really wish that I could have put on max risk on this one. About like $100. I was risking about $50 today, de-risking because of this conditions. But yeah, no, I really wish we took maybe some kind of partial underneath this low, just to kind of get something in the books today, but it's okay. And then after we had this buy side sweep, I'm seeing ES, is filling in this 5 minute for rally gap very nicely. Not 5 minute, 5 minute for rally gap, and 5 minute order block. So I'm gonna go over to ES real quick. We fill that in, and then once again we get a double for value gap, I take a sell, and then we get chopped up again, and then it takes the low. So days like this, it's hard to find an entry, especially if you're not entering near the highs or the lows, because of all this chop that goes on. That's why I went break even here, and didn't really want a partial because I was expecting us to run and take this ES sell side before 11 o'clock. Yeah, so our macro would take us lower. But yeah, I just want to kind of say this was my, I would say, hardest week I've had in a long time. Very hard week. Only down $200, but still, it's a tough week for me. The first First week of this month was all right. Second week, 2 good wins and then 3 losses, and then finally this week ending out red, minus $200. These market conditions were tough. On the 17th, I would have had a really nice trade, but I just didn't take my profits. So that's kind of how mistakes and not being as efficient as possible can ruin your long-term P&L. But I'm okay. As long as we keep our losses short and our wins big, then we're gonna be good. But yeah, no, I'm honestly surprised how today played out. I knew TGIF wanted to play. This buy side take was kind of suspect for me, which is why I think we consolidated so hard. Because if we had a clear buy side sweep, we would have had a much cleaner run to that downside. But yeah, and I just want to say a couple things about basically this week. I want to see. Yeah, so this week, what am I looking for? Yeah, this week was just not that solid. It was a heavy de-risk week because we just took that payout last week. Yeah, we took this payout last week, and then now we had a de-risk about $100 per trade, and yeah, I like it. But the moral of the story is that after I take this payout, the market will test me. I maybe a little bit I was too on my high horse in order to really predict the market. But that's kind of given. After you get that payout, it's gonna be testing you. Are you really capable of doing this long term, consistently and profitably? Are you willing to risk manage? Are you willing to take only your setup, etc. Because even though I have 2 losing days in a row, I'm basically I had 3 last week, and I'm basing it off discipline. I'm keeping my risk tight. I'm not placing dumb trades, and basically being the most profitable trader I could be. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that we had to end this week off red. I'm not mad about it. Still green in the month. We still have about 2 weeks or a week and a half of September left. I'm excited to see where this is gonna go. The market is all-time highs, and I could definitely see some longer time frame retracements coming in. But yeah, it's nice to see. We finally found some sort of direction, but I believe these lows are insane. We're gonna come down there, and in quite a bit. But we're looking very, very bullish. But yeah, I just want to reinforce the fact that losses are part of trading. You're not gonna be, every week. You're not gonna be necessarily profitable. That'd be gonna be crazy. Last month I had a great month, so I'm due, to really test myself and to see if I can hold up in these conditions. But yeah, if we go over Monday, no trade. Tuesday, no trade. Wednesday we would have had about like a $500 trade if I took my take profit when I was supposed to. Yesterday we had just a wrong narrative, so it took it made us take a good loss. We had max risk on that day. But that goes to show when I'm convicted and I have full conviction, I'm going to risk my appropriate amount, and I'm not going to FOMO in after that. I'm not going to over leverage. I'm not going to do the things that outside of my trading analysis will screw me up, my psychology aspects. So yeah, as long as we keep this risk tight until I get to 1K balance, or about $300. So next week I'm gonna be basically have 3 trades at $100 before the expresses are gone. So yeah, it's gonna be it's not even mentally stressing. It's just lock in and figure it out. But yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say. There's nothing else in here. Nasdaq was a little rough today. I will give her that. But in the end, I did know the narrative. Push up off the rip. Because if we were bullish, we would have came to the low, sucked these lows first, and then I think decided through the highs. Not decided, but decided to go to the highs. But yeah, so if you just look at it kind of like this, it's kind of an easier interpretation. We leave these relative equal lows. We then get this fair value gap right here. Just like a clear, just very bread and butter analysis. Order block up here, holds price down. This high is protected. We have an SMT high, I believe right here or right here. And then we break lower, take this low, retrace into a larger time frame. Fair value gap or order block. I don't know. Yeah, we kind of just retraced heavy up there. I think it might have been on the 1 minute because we had an order block. Yeah, we had liquidity right above this high. You know, low, swing high, swing low. And then we also have this propulsion, this order block. So, you know, should price ran up here, you know, technically the model, the sell model to the double rally gap worked to the downside right here with this low. But since I was targeting the highest hanging fruit and we were high resistance, price wanted to come back and then tap me out. So, you know, that's kind of knowing, you know, the narrative, and seeing, you know, what price is going to do basically, you know, before and after essentially. Because, like, you know, the trade was good, you know, I was up quite a bit. And then, you know, once we hit this low, go break even, and then, you know, comes back to us. But then, you know, that we're kind of missing the narrative in that situation, because I'm not expecting price to come back all the way up into here. But yeah, you know, next week, it's gonna be a brand new week. I'm ready to get to it. And yeah, you know, nothing crazy. So y'all stay safe, and I'll see you later. Peace out.